The dojo smelled faintly of polished wood and sweat. The faint hum of the ceiling fan was swallowed up by the murmur of voices, the shuffle of bare feet across mats, and the sharp echo of fists meeting padded targets. It was a typical evening in this suburban martial arts school, students in white uniforms, belts tied snugly, eager to prove themselves, eager to belong. But beneath the calm order of the room, an old tension lingered, invisible yet present, like the hidden crack in a flawless vase. At the center of it all stood Marcus Hale, a man many admired and some feared. A fifth-degree black belt instructor and self-proclaimed master of discipline, Marcus carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He spoke often of honor, respect, and tradition. But what many didn't see, at least not openly, was how his sense of respect seemed to bend and falter when the person in front of him didn't fit his definition of worthiness. His students whispered about his temper, his sharp tongue, and the way he sometimes laughed at newcomers who dared to challenge him. On that evening, among the scattered faces, there was one that stood out. Her name was Althea Johnson. Tall, poised, with the calm grace of someone who had endured far worse than ridicule, she walked into the dojo quietly, wearing a simple uniform and no belt at all. Her skin was deep brown, her hair tied back, and her eyes steady with a determination that didn't need words. Some students glanced at her curiously. This wasn't the usual crowd. Althea hadn't come for a class. She had come because she was dared. It began outside in the parking lot, where Marcus's voice had carried like thunder, mocking and playful all at once. "I'll give you a chance," he had said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Step inside, step on the mat, and spar with me. Just for fun, to see what you've got." He had laughed, and some of his students laughed with him. To Marcus, it was a joke. To Althea, it was anything but. She knew what his words meant, the undertone, the disbelief that a black woman, with no belt tied around her waist, could possibly stand toe-to-toe with a decorated black belt in his own domain. She saw the smirk, the smugness, the arrogance disguised as jest. And in that moment, something inside her refused to let it slide. It wasn't just about a spar. It was about dignity. So she agreed. Now as she stepped onto the mat, the dojo grew quieter. Conversations dimmed, eyes turned, and even the children sensed something was different. Marcus stood opposite her, stretching his shoulders, smiling a wide grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'll go easy on you. This is just a little fun." Althea said nothing. She bowed politely, the way she had learned years ago in a smaller, less prestigious dojo run by an aging sensei, who taught more about discipline than trophies. That bow carried weight. It wasn't a formality, it was respect for the art, for the moment, for the test ahead. The bell rang. Marcus moved first, fast, snapping into a stance and circling with the confidence of a predator toying with prey. The audience expected a show, a lopsided contest where the master would demonstrate superiority without truly harming the challenger. But as Marcus feinted forward, something unexpected happened. Althea didn't flinch. She stepped lightly, fluidly, her posture relaxed yet unshakable. The years of discipline she had honed quietly, away from watchful crowds, emerged in her body's rhythm. Marcus struck with a swift jab meant to test her reflexes. In a breath, she parried, redirecting the energy, her movement so natural it seemed rehearsed. The dojo grew quieter. Another strike, faster this time. She slipped under it, pivoted, and delivered a measured tap to Marcus's ribs, not hard. Not arrogant, just enough to say, "I see you." A ripple went through the room. Some students gasped softly. Marcus's smile tightened, his pride pricked. He chuckled, but the laugh rang hollow. "All right then," he muttered. His voice carried the edge of irritation now. The match continued, seconds stretching into eternity. Every move Marcus made, Althea answered, not with aggression, but with precision. She was not here to humiliate, nor to prove herself superior. She was here to stand, to resist being belittled, to remind the room that skill and spirit are not bound by gender, skin, or the shallow judgments of men who wield power carelessly. By the fifth exchange, sweat glistened on Marcus's brow. He lunged with a powerful kick, sharp and fast, the kind that had dropped dozens of opponents before. But Althea met it with perfect timing. Her arm swept. Her stance solid, and with a twist she redirected the force, leaving Marcus stumbling just enough for the room to see. Silence fell. Absolute silence. No one laughed anymore. No one smirked. The only sound was the heavy rhythm of Marcus's breathing and the quiet, measured calm of Althea standing tall before him. For the first time in his own dojo, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. And in that silence, as eyes darted between the man they once admired and the woman who had dared to stand against him, something shifted. It wasn't just about martial arts anymore. It was about pride, dignity, and the breaking of a pattern older than the walls of that dojo. The challenge had begun as a joke, but now no one was laughing. The seconds ticked by, heavy with anticipation. What would happen next would not only define the outcome of a spar, but would etch itself into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. For Althea, it was never about victory. It was about being seen, being respected, and reclaiming a space where silence and prejudice had too long reigned unchallenged. The dojo held its breath. The air in the dojo was thick now, as if every breath taken by the students carried the weight of disbelief. Some leaned forward, their eyes wide, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. A black belt, someone they had revered, was being matched, countered, and silently humbled by a woman whom he had dared only moments ago. Marcus clenched his jaw, circling once more. His pride burned hotter than his muscles. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, much less in front of his own students. To him, the dojo was his kingdom, and tonight his authority trembled under the quiet, resolute stance of Althea Johnson. "You've got some skill," he muttered, his voice low enough to sound almost like respect, but sharp enough to sting. He wanted to rattle her, to shake her composure. But Althea's face remained calm, her breathing measured. She was no stranger to being underestimated. She had lived her life beneath the weight of assumptions, that she was weaker, that she was out of place, that her presence was something to mock rather than honor. Yet in every instance, she had learned to stand taller, not through anger, but through an unyielding sense of self. Marcus lunged again, faster, sharper, throwing a flurry of strikes meant to overwhelm. His fists cut through the air, his legs whipped like iron rods. The room tensed, waiting for her to falter. But Althea did not retreat. She met each attack with precision, her body moving like water, absorbing, redirecting, flowing around force instead of resisting it head-on. And then, in a single moment that stole the breath from the room, she stepped in and swept Marcus's leg just enough to send him off balance. The great black belt stumbled, catching himself awkwardly with one hand. A soundless gasp seemed to ripple through the dojo. The master, the untouchable, had touched the ground. Marcus rose quickly, face flushed. He forced a laugh, but it echoed against the walls like glass shattering. His students exchanged glances, some proud of their teacher, others unsettled, their admiration beginning to fracture. Althea, still steady, spoke for the first time. Her voice was low but carried with clarity. This was never for fun. Respect should not be a game. The words pierced deeper than any strike. Marcus froze, his chest heaving, his pride colliding with the reality before him. Those watching could feel the shift. The spar had grown into something larger, something none of them could deny. A boy near the edge of the mat whispered to his friend, "She's teaching him." His tone wasn't mocking. It was awe. Marcus heard it. He tightened his fists, torn between rage and recognition. In that moment, memories of his own journey as a martial artist flashed across his mind. His first instructor teaching him humility, the years spent learning that true strength wasn't domination, but discipline. Somewhere along the way he had forgotten. Somewhere, his title had become a shield for arrogance rather than a reflection of mastery. But pride, that old demon, still pushed him forward. With a growl, Marcus surged again, his strikes faster, wilder, his need to reclaim dominance outweighing his discipline. Yet as if foreseeing every move, Althea countered calmly. She did not fight with anger, nor with the desire to humiliate. Every motion was deliberate, balanced, as though she carried the weight of generations in her hands. Then it happened. In one clean, fluid motion, she sidestepped his kick, pivoted on her heel, and with the lightest sweep of her arm, redirected him once more. This time Marcus fell hard, the thud of his body reverberating through the dojo floor. Silence consumed the room. He lay there for a moment, stunned, not by pain, but by the undeniable truth that he had been defeated, not by brute strength, not by aggression, but by composure, dignity, and unwavering discipline. Slowly Marcus rose to his knees, his eyes fixed on the mat, his breath ragged. For the first time in years, he bowed his head, not in formality, not in mockery, but in something approaching respect. The students, unsure of what to do, followed instinctively. One by one, their heads lowered, some out of habit, others out of newfound reverence, not for Marcus, but for the woman who stood tall before him. Althea did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply bowed, the same respectful bow she had offered at the beginning, as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had. A young girl in the corner, no older than 12, looked at her with wide, shining eyes. For the first time, she saw herself reflected on the mat, not as someone who might be mocked, but as someone capable of commanding silence, of standing in power without needing permission. That moment etched itself into her heart like fire. Marcus finally stood, his chest heavy, his eyes avoiding the crowd. "Enough," he said hoarsely, his voice stripped of arrogance. "That will do." But everyone knew it was not just the spar that had ended. It was something much deeper. The dojo itself felt altered, as though its foundation had been shaken and rebuilt in those few silent seconds. Althea stepped off the mat, her footsteps soft yet powerful. She did not look back because she didn't need to. Respect once denied had been reclaimed in full view of all who had doubted her. She had come not to win, but to remind the world that dignity is not handed down by titles or belts. It is carried within, unbroken. And as the door closed behind her, the dojo remained silent still. The lesson lingered heavier than any kata, more powerful than any strike. The students would speak of it for years, not as the night Marcus was defeated, but as the night a woman's quiet courage forced them all to confront the truth about strength, respect, and justice. But Marcus, standing in the center of his own kingdom, felt something stir that he hadn't in years. Shame, yes, but also something else. A small, painful seed of humility. And though his pride resisted somewhere deep inside, he knew this was the lesson he had needed all along. The night wasn't over. The silence that followed her departure wasn't just emptiness. It was the echo of change, and that change was only beginning. The dojo remained still long after Althea's footsteps faded into the night. Students lingered, their whispers hushed, their eyes darting between one another as if searching for meaning in the silence. It wasn't just that a sparring match had ended differently than expected, it was that the veil had been torn away. They had seen something raw, undeniable, and it left them unsettled in ways they couldn't easily explain. Marcus Hale stood in the center of the mat, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. For years he had cultivated a reputation as unshakable, invincible, the embodiment of martial discipline. But in mere minutes that image had been dismantled, not by brute force, not by rage, but by a woman's calm defiance and precision. He felt the sting of humiliation, but beneath it, buried like a coal beneath ash, was a truth he could not deny. He had been wrong. He bowed his head slightly, though no one demanded it. The gesture felt foreign, awkward, almost painful. His students waited, unsure if they should stay or leave. One finally spoke, a teenager in the front row, his voice careful. "Master Hale, who was she?" The question sliced through the silence. Marcus hesitated. His pride wanted to dismiss her as a fluke, an anomaly, someone who got lucky. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was a lie his students would see through. They had watched every movement, every exchange. There had been no luck, only mastery. "She was a lesson," Marcus said finally, his voice low, gravelly. "One I should have remembered long ago." The students exchanged glances. Some nodded slowly, others simply stared. But the weight of his words carried further than he realized. In that moment, Marcus Hale wasn't just a teacher of techniques. He was a man stripped bare before his own disciples, and in his vulnerability, something unexpected began to take root. Across town, Althea walked home beneath the streetlights, her steps steady. She didn't replay the fight in her mind, because for her it hadn't been about victory or defeat. It had been about respect, something she had demanded not with words or anger, but with action. Yet she carried no glee, no satisfaction in Marcus's humiliation. Instead, she felt the quiet pride of someone who had stayed true to herself despite the odds. Althea knew what it meant to walk into spaces where she wasn't expected to belong. She knew the sting of doubting eyes, the weight of stereotypes that pressed on her shoulders like invisible chains. But tonight she had reminded not just Marcus, but everyone in that dojo that dignity cannot be mocked out of existence. It lives, it breathes, and when called upon it commands silence. The days that followed brought ripples through the dojo. Students spoke about the match in hushed tones, replaying the movements, debating the meaning. Some criticized Marcus for letting his pride get the better of him. Others admired Althea's composure, though they struggled to articulate why it had shaken them so deeply. A few began to question what they had been taught about strength, whether it truly lived in belts and titles, or in the way one carried themselves when tested. Marcus, meanwhile, felt the weight of his own arrogance heavier with each passing day. He replayed the fall, the silence, the bow he had given almost instinctively. Shame lingered, but alongside it, a lesson he could not ignore. Late at night, when the dojo was empty, he trained alone, not with fury, but with the humility of a beginner. Each kata felt different now, as though the spirit of the art had returned, reminding him of what he had lost. One evening, a week later, the dojo doors opened quietly. Althea stepped inside, not with the intent to challenge, but to observe. Conversations halted as students recognized her. This time, though, there were no smirks, no laughter. Only respect. Marcus approached slowly, his usual commanding stride replaced with careful steps. His voice was measured, almost reverent. "You came back." Althea nodded. "I wasn't sure if I should." "You should," he said, bowing deeply this time, his forehead nearly touching the mat. Gasps rose from the students. Never before had they seen their master bow like this, not even to visiting black belts. "I disrespected you," he continued, "and in doing so I disrespected the art. You taught me a lesson I will not forget. If you will allow it, this dojo is open to you, not as a guest, not as a challenge, but as an equal." The words stunned the room. Students stared wide-eyed as Marcus Hale, their proud master, humbled himself before the woman he had mocked. Althea studied him for a long moment. She could see the sincerity, the struggle in his eyes, and though she had no desire for titles or recognition, she understood the importance of this moment, not for her, but for the ones watching. "I didn't come for your approval," she said softly. "I came because you challenged me, and I couldn't ignore what was beneath your words. But if you're ready to teach with respect, then I'm ready to share what I know." Marcus bowed again, and this time the students followed, not out of habit, but out of genuine reverence. From that night on, the dojo was different. It became a place not of pride and domination, but of learning and respect. Althea returned, not as a student beneath Marcus, but as a partner in teaching. Together they blended their approaches, his years of technical mastery, her quiet discipline forged through resilience. The dojo grew stronger, not because of one person's power, but because of the balance they created. The young girl who had watched in awe that first night found in Althea a mentor, someone who showed her that strength could wear her skin, her face, her story. Others, too, found themselves changed. Students, who once thought belts defined worth, now understood that respect was earned, not by color, gender, or title, but by the way one carried themselves in the heat of challenge. And Marcus himself changed the most. He no longer boasted of his victories or demanded respect through fear. Instead, he taught humility, telling the story of the night the dojo went silent, not as a tale of shame, but as the moment that saved him from forgetting the true spirit of martial arts. In time, people outside the dojo heard the story. Some dismissed it as rumor, others as exaggeration. But those who had been there never forgot. They remembered the silence, the shift, the way dignity had walked into the room and demanded to be seen. For Althea, life moved on, but the lesson remained clear. Sometimes, standing tall for even a few seconds can change an entire room, an entire mindset, an entire legacy. Her courage had not only silenced mockery, it had planted seeds of respect that would grow for generations. And for the students, the memory of that night became their compass. Whenever pride tempted them, whenever they judged someone unworthy before seeing their spirit, they remembered. The night the dojo went silent was the night they learned what true strength looked like. Strength was not domination. It was dignity. It was courage. It was respect. And it was unforgettable.